Welcome to Pep Talk and Pickleball, the podcast where we explore empty nest life, health, fitness, and nutrition, all with a side of pickleball fun. I'm your host, Jill Lewis, your guide through this exciting phase of life. As a certified faster way to fat loss coach and fellow empty nester, I'm here to share insights, interview experts, and yes, sprinkle in some pickleball talk. Join me for weekly doses of motivation and laughter as we navigate health, happiness, and pickleball passion. Grab your paddle, join the conversation, and let's dive into Pep Talk and Pickleball. Welcome back to Pep Talk and Pickleball. This is your host, Jill Lewis. Today on the episode, I have got Jennifer Collins. Jennifer is a master coach for moms like so many of us that are getting ready to become empty nesters, or maybe you are a new empty nester. You're definitely going to want to listen in. Jennifer's going to share so much knowledge with us, and I just want to welcome you to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Jill. I'm honored to be here.
Well, thank you for being here and taking your time. Jennifer's also a podcast host. She has a podcast called Small Jar Podcast, and we'll have to ask her about that later too. So Jennifer, like I said, so many of the women in my audience are either getting ready to become empty nesters or they already are. So share with us your journey, if you will, and how you became, a coach for moms preparing for empty nest life.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Well, I actually started thinking ahead to the empty nest well before my kids ever went to college. I think I started realizing, there's a point where your kids start getting involved in activities and you're so involved in their life. And all of a sudden I found myself at home doing laundry where they're doing all this cool stuff. And I started really thinking ahead to, how did I end up in this place where I've always been this kind of high achieving woman? I was working full time, but somehow, even though I had all the boxes checked, I felt kind of dissatisfied with my life, which seemed completely ridiculous. Like I should have been grateful for it, right? And so I actually found another life coach's podcast and started listening in and started really understanding how much we give up our ability to create our own happiness and peace to the circumstances of our life. Like we kind of wait for everything to be perfectly in line and our kids to be behaving and us to have all our ducks in a row. And then we give ourselves permission to be happy. And so much of that message resonated with me that I was already kind of finding so much transformation in my own life. I had to get certified to start doing it for myself. And so once I got certified, I started building this company. And at that point my oldest was kind of on the road to applying to college. And I thought, this is a time of life. He started to pull away and I was facing all of those teenage challenges and the fights of, him wanting to be independent. And I thought that this time, which I've started to kind of call the empty nest straddle, which is like this slow road of letting go throughout the teen years, which really continues for some of us into college when we're kind of grappling with them being away and then coming home. And in the meantime, we're kind of trying to find our identity separate from them. And for some women, that's an easier process than others. And so I think sometimes that comparison can hurt as well.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I mean, just so much of what you said, I just start internalizing it and thinking about my own family and the different personalities and how relationships change and evolve. It's just with your children and how interesting all of that is. Well, tell me, what about some of the common emotional challenges that moms face, when their kids are starting to leave home?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many women come to me. Sometimes they'll feel so enmeshed. And this happens kind of even in the middle school years where they start to see their kids experience challenges, kind of the ups and downs of dealing with friendships and awkwardness. And we so want to help and support our kids, but we can't help but go on the roller coaster ride with them. And so, often, and I think all of us have probably at some point said, like, I can't be okay unless my kids are okay. And really understanding kind of how to hold space for some of your pain when you're going to see someone you love struggling with that without needing to fix it, without needing to kind of jump in. So that's a big one. And depending on the ages of your kids and the challenges they're going through. That can be one that many of us face. But again, as you said, with different kids, different stages, unfortunately, sometimes it feels like you go through it with one kid and then you face a completely different set of challenges and opportunities with the other one. And so it's almost like the knowledge doesn't feel like it builds on itself. It's just a whole new set of challenges. Another thing I think women come to me with is, high levels of anxiety as they think about the risks that their kids might be facing, or, wanting them to be okay again. And also anxiety about thinking ahead to the empty nest. I almost think that lead up to that time can create so much kind of fear of the unknown and catastrophizing in our minds that we really build it up. And look, we're going through perimenopause and menopause, so there's all sorts of hormonal stuff going on, not to mention any of the other pieces of our lives that could be complicated. So anxiety is definitely one. Frustration with our kids when they pull away. And we're also just really hard on ourselves, I think, as women in general, whether that's, in the way that we parent or in the way that we live our life or our bodies, which I know is something that you really kind of help empower women to think about. And so just figuring out how to love ourselves through that whole process is a challenge as well.
Man, it really is kind of a perfect storm when you think about it. Emotionally, your children are getting older. You are yourself are going through physical, hormonal changes. There's probably things happening with your parents also, or maybe even if you still are lucky enough to have your grandparents. There's just so many things coming at you that it is a lot to deal with. And when you were saying catastrophize before children, I wasn't afraid of anything. I mean, I was kind of just balls to the walls, high speed. I love doing all of the crazy things, jumping out of an airplane or, driving a boat as fast as I could. I mean, just, I was just kind of out there. And then, that came to a screeching halt once I had my first child. And then it was like I became a fatalist,
Oh, true. It's so true. It's like you're wearing your heart out in the world and it's exposed to all the elements, and you can't keep these children safe. And I spend a lot of time on my podcast too. I think sometimes empowering us to realize that, from a very early age, like even you think back to when you were pregnant, how you would take care of yourself and take the vitamins and that sort of thing. And then, the child is born and you're like on hyper alert to make sure that they don't roll off the changing table. And it's almost like any habit that you have. Like we've been brushing our teeth for so long and we've been protecting our kids for so long that some of our instinct to protect them is just, it's habitual. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, sometimes I'll joke with my kids. I'm like, I kept you alive. You're welcome. Sorry if I'm a little overprotective now, but you know what? Old habits die hard. And so I think sometimes when we love ourselves through kind of realizing we've actually built a series of skill sets that have made us really successful as a mom, but sometimes that also can play out in ways that, particularly as our kids become baby adults and think that they're able to take on the world without us, there becomes that push and pull where we're not quite ready to let go.
I mean, but that makes so much sense that that is such a habit, an innate habit in us to just make sure that they're safe and that they're taken care of. And you're watching for all possible things to go wrong, around them. And so what is the best way then for, moms to mentally and emotionally prepare themselves for this transition?
Yeah, well, it's such a great question. I mean, to think, because all of us are different and we all approach it in different ways, I've actually, through my work with clients, started to develop 4 different mom archetypes where, and I have a quiz on my website that you can go through and kind of get an assessment of which archetype you are. And it works kind of like the Enneagram, where you might be a combination of these. And these are really just not diagnoses in any way. In fact, in some ways, it's pointing us to kind of like the analogy I made with how we have this habit of protection. It's kind of looking at all of these skill sets that we've developed as moms in different ways to help support our kids over the years, and which ones we tend to lean into now that they're teenagers and we're kind of having that challenge of letting go and figuring out what comes next for us. And so The first one is the guardian mom, which is really that protector, kind of that fear, stand in front of a car to save her children. Kind of, we all have that instinct in us. And so, that makes us vulnerable to catastrophizing and fear of the unknown, as we discussed. Another archetype is the achiever mom, who I like to think of her as the go-getter, the one who is, really successful in areas of her life and wants her kids to be successful as well. And so she's willing to go above and beyond to kind of help their kids be successful. And she's been doing that again for so long that as her own kids start kind of trying to do it their own way, or don't necessarily want to take mom's advice anymore, that becomes a bit of a challenge. There's also a lot of problems or challenges our kids will face that we can't fix anymore. And so that becomes hard for the achiever mom. So some of the struggles that this archetype might have is sometimes a little bit of the illusion of control, like what do I have control over and what do I not? Sometimes perfectionism, like we're hard on ourselves, we blame ourselves when things go wrong. So that can be kind of difficult because, of course, the achiever mom doesn't want to fail and certainly doesn't want to fail her children. And the nurturer mom is one who loves unconditionally, but then the flip side of that is her identity is tied up in her kids and being a mom and that sort of thing. And the last one's the mentor mom, who's the cheerleader, sees her kids' potential, but on the flip side can sometimes have thoughts that are judgmental. And then, of course, she judges herself for judging her kids. So in all of these, it's kind of understanding that they come with a certain mindset in terms of the way you view your role as a mother and the way that you want to help support your kids to be safe, to be successful and happy. And these are big goals, and we might not even see how they play out in the same way that our kids do. So, our kids, particularly the risk-taking kids, might see safety as very different than the way we, of course, ideally want them to be safe. And, the same with happiness and success. And so through my program, what I help moms see is really how their mindset is driving both their positive attributes and the way they show up in their role specifically as moms, but also in the way that it sometimes kind of keeps us stuck in these feelings that really kind of hold us back. By being able to really kind of understand your own mind, you can take more control over your emotional well-being. So being able to sort out what is just normal worry here and what is the anxiety that I'm creating by spinning and catastrophizing and that sort of thing. And I teach a process that really breaks this down. So it's not just about thinking happy thoughts and trying to change your mind, because that just never works. If you're really worried about something, that is a legitimate concern that you have. But being able to unravel it so it makes more sense to you is really, to me, kind of the roadmap to any goal that you want to achieve. But in this transition, depending on what's the challenge, whether it's related to your kids or frankly, whether it's related to finding your identity once you let go of your kids, which is kind of another big component of it. All of that is really about how you view yourself and how you view your role and what you want to be, how you want to live your life.
So good. So those 4 archetype moms, it was the guardian, achiever, nurturer, and cheerleader. Is that what?
Yeah, mentor. Yeah.
Mentor. Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And so I will put in today's show notes for everyone where you can take this quiz with Jennifer. It's an online quiz. I took the quiz and no shock to me, but I was the achiever mom. And I think my kids, if they read through that, they'd go, yep, check.
It's awesome.
But it is really interesting. And then I listened to, she had a podcast episode where she breaks down each one of those archetypes. And I found it really interesting and just really good self-reflection. So definitely check that out in today's show notes for sure. Awesome. When we talk so much about as moms, I mean, we're obsessed with our kids for good reason. We love them so much. When I'm talking with my clients and potential clients, I'm always telling them, like, what about you? What's happening with you? And it's always what's happening with the people that they're living with. And you said something earlier in our conversation about we tend to wait for that perfect time to start doing X, Y, or Z. And I've noticed, I have so many moms that I work with that they don't want to start with their health and wellness journey until XYZ is taken care of and they've got just this clean slate, which, as we know, we go through life. Your calendar never gets emptied. It never clears. Even when your kids are gone, there's always things that pop up. There's never a perfect time. But like, what are the practical steps that you're helping women to take to redefine their identity, their purpose after their kids have left home?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I think one of the really interesting things that was so eye-opening to me as I learned about coaching in the way that I teach it is that we kind of think that motivation kind of comes from outside of us, that purpose comes from outside of us, that these are things that, again, it's like the world has to kind of align perfectly, and then I'll feel motivated, and then I'll feel fulfilled and purposeful. And really starting to understand that no matter what the circumstances in your life, you have a choice about how you think about it, about how you approach it. And if we're thinking about our life in a way where, I'm not motivated and, I don't have purpose, that's a legitimate mindset, right? That's like a lot of us can feel that way going into the empty nest. But assuming that that's something that you feel like isn't where you want to be, like if you really want to find purpose and if you really want to find the motivation to look into that, that's not going to necessarily come from just doing things. It really has to start with your mindset of being willing to try, being willing to kind of understand, like, what is holding me back? And sometimes when it comes to, just taking steps like getting involved in a fitness routine or finding kind of that next big thing, the thing that's often holding us back is things like, well, I've never gotten in shape before, and so why should I start now? Or, my purpose was connected to my kids. So, now that I'm losing that, there's nothing else in my life that will be as valuable and as important. And those like tricky subconscious thoughts are actually what's holding us back, right? Because we can say that we want to find purpose and, make new friends, but we ultimately, when we see ourselves not taking action, it's typically because we're being held back by some small thought in our mind that's really questioning whether we have it in us, whether it's even worth the effort. And again, it's not about whether those thoughts are right or wrong. The question is just, is that how you want to go about your life? I mean, I think, we now are in a situation where we're barely halfway through our life, out in our late 40s and 50s. I mean, we could be all living to well beyond 100 by the time we get there. So we have a lot of life left to live. And that wasn't necessarily true of the women who came before us. And so thinking about the second time of life, it's almost really kind of exciting to think about how we're redefining it in a new way and how women are empowering themselves to go out and create a whole new set of skill sets and careers in the second half of life. And I'm hoping that as our daughters grow up and look back, they kind of see us as role models in terms of how to take advantage of this next step. But a lot of it really has to do with these small niggling ways in terms of how we hold ourselves back. And as someone who is also an achiever mom and always thought of myself as really like someone who was able to achieve, I was actually surprised at how much I was using my role as a mom and my need for fulfillment as an excuse to hold me back. And it's just in kind of really a lot of self-inquiry to understand how that's working in your own life.
So good. I started my career at 45. I'm 50 now, but what you're saying, I say so many times, I'm like, this is just the second act. It's just getting started. So I'm like a toddler, in my second phase of life,
So exciting.
It really is. And I have to say, I really enjoy the empty nesting for me has been I think it was more just the thought process of I was really excited for we have two boys and a girl, and I was really excited for my sons. And I feel like as a family, we were ready for that next phase of life, and we were all excited about it. For the youngest, the baby, she's a girl, you know, it was a little bit harder for us, and she went the furthest away. So for my husband and I, it did feel more difficult. And in fact, when she went away to school, my husband and I were like, we can't go straight home. We booked it like a 10-day vacation right after we took her,
That's a
just
good
to kind
idea,
of
actually.
just to distract ourselves. So
Yeah.
then when it was time to come home, we were actually ready, and that was while she was going through sorority rush. And for me, I knew that I would sit and be so worried about her going through that process that it was so good to be just disconnected and,
Totally. No, I love that.
but that's what we did. And then, once it was over, it was like, oh, we are really enjoying this. We had our kids right away. I mean, months after we got married, we had our first son. So we've never had just time for the two of us. And we find it actually really fun. Now, sometimes we fuss and we hem haw around about how we haven't seen them enough, or of course we miss them. But I think doing things like we have a family group chat in our text, which we're all very active in, which is really nice. And we make efforts to see each other. The children make efforts to see each other, which is so heartwarming as parents. So I feel like the journey, is going pretty well for us in particular. But like, when you're talking to moms, I know there's a fine line of when my boys went away to school, I wanted to reach out to them. I wanted to know details about their days, but I
Yeah.
knew that wasn't really like what I needed to be doing. I had to constantly remind myself, this is about them. This isn't about you. Let them, so like, what's your advice for moms and like keeping that deep connection with your children, but also knowing when to back off a little bit, just let them fly, but let them know you still care. It's like a fine line to walk.
It really is. It's so true. When I think one of the big things that I always talk about with my clients is that my job isn't to tell you how to parent, but to help you kind of find your truth in terms of what works for you and your family and your values. Because some of our kids need us to reach out to them on a regular basis, and really need the
True.
support of our constant connection. And so your own kids, others of us, I would text my son and maybe he'd text back, and so it's understanding that at the end of the day, there's the kind of decision of how much you reach out based on how much they really seem to need you. And that could even be as simple as a conversation with them to kind of make sure that you're respecting their boundaries as an adult. But on the other hand, I kind of also say that at the end of the day, I get to text as often as I want because I love my son and I want him to know that I'm thinking about him, but I take responsibility for my own feelings about how much he texts me back. So if he doesn't text me back, I don't make it mean he's hurt. I watch my brain want to go there. I'm like, we're not gonna start catastrophizing about it. But I also don't take it personally. And again, that's a choice. That's sometimes something that we make on autopilot because we text them, they don't text, and we can kind of feel like, what kind of treatment is this, and decide it's disrespectful. And that is certainly something that you can choose to do. But to me, that takes away any peace I have, right? So I intentionally lean into that. I get to text you, and I respect that you get to text me back as much as I can. And finding that kind of ability to take ownership of my feelings in a way that becomes very independent of how they respond to me. And I think it's an important piece of building connection with anyone, because I think sometimes with other adults, we can be more self-aware about it. Like if we have a friend who doesn't text us back, we're kind of like, okay, well, that's just her. She doesn't text us back. But all of a sudden it's our kids. It becomes a bigger like, well, they shouldn't do that. And I'm the mom. And while yes, of course, like we would all like our kids to be texting us back and have that warm relationship, I think it's also helpful to remember that sometimes we have to meet our kids where they are. And whatever the texture of our relationship right now also doesn't mean it's what it will always be. And so I think the more we're able to respect where they are, the more they're going to continue to meet us halfway, hopefully closer and closer to where we want to be.
I really like that answer a lot. That is so true. And you're right. There are, kids out there that do need to hear from their parent. Everybody's different. I think that's so important to remember. Let's talk about reconnecting with your partner. If you're still married when your kids are going off and flying the coop, what's your advice there for strengthening that relationship? Do you have any tips?
Yeah, well, that's a big one, especially I think, I mean, look, like going through it with teenagers, it's, and some of us get through it and are on the same page, but there's a lot of stress that goes into this time of life. And, again, I think it's about taking responsibility for your own side of connection. I mean, one of the things that the analogy I like to make is if you're walking down the street and someone calls out, I love you and I appreciate you, you would be like, okay, that's weird. And you would just walk by, right? You would be like, that doesn't mean anything. And you discount it because your thought is that person is a stranger. Right? Like it isn't, it's weird. Of course, he doesn't love me or appreciate me. But then
Right.
our husbands, all of a sudden we're like, well, you don't, because of what you did, you don't appreciate me. And because you didn't say, I love you, you don't love me. And so it's like we set up these expectations of our partner that then set us up for disappointment. And so what I always like to say to my clients, and this is true for our kids too, it's not that you don't get to have expectations of the people in your life, but you need to take accountability for them, because what we do is we have expectations for like every single thing, right? Like I used to joke that I have expectations that my husband doesn't leave his shoes under the coffee table. Well, you know where he leaves his shoes every single day is under the coffee table. But at the end of the day, like, even though I have this expectation, is it worth me setting a boundary around? Like, am I willing to say, honey, this is like, however, like fidelity, like if he cheats on me, that's a boundary I'm willing to hold around, what happens in our marriage if that line were to be crossed. And so I think it's understanding that in your mind, you're constantly evaluating your partner. And we also have history with these people, right? So we've been evaluating for a long time and probably have built up a list of, potentially icks or oohs or resentment that we feel kind of are not right. And look, we always get to make the decision to leave the marriage, right? Like we get to have to go to counseling and, try to work through challenges. There are a lot of different strategies you can take if you decide the marriage is over or the marriage is worth saving. But sometimes on just a very small level, what I find with my clients is just learning to take accountability for your own expectations often provides so much more space for that other person to be who they are, and then allows you to be really honest about the things that really bother you. Like, here are the things I actually want to address with you, rather than I wish you would unload the dishwasher more. And, like the nitpicky conversations you have where all of a sudden now you both feel, and then they're probably responding in kind. And so now you both feel attacked. And so it really is, I mean, marriages are work, relationships are work. And just knowing that this might be something that you have the opportunity to rebuild now that you have time to focus on each other. But, the also reality is we've been together for a long time, a lot of us. And so sometimes we also have to be honest with ourselves about what's really going to make us happy.
So true. I mean, like I said earlier, we didn't have time just to ourselves when we first got married, but oh my gosh, we've had so much time together in the
Exactly.
last 4.5, or I guess 3.5 years since our daughter went away to school. It's like, wow, we are BFFs plus, I mean, we are together all obviously when, not while we're working, but every other moment. And then we travel a lot too. So I think what's really important is that we have always stayed on the same page with when it comes to how we raised our kids, how we view finances, like all the big things, our, religious belief, like all of those things we have always been in alignment on. And I mean, we've had to work through, stuff, don't get me wrong, but it's just interesting how for us it feels like, oh, this is good. We actually really like just the two of us at night getting to pick what we, are going to watch. We've never been big TV watchers, and now it's like, oh, we get to binge these shows and we can pick what we want. We don't have to like go run anybody around. Like, we love having slow evenings and slow mornings.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. It's so true. And I think, you're really lucky when you find that relationship. And, some of us are still looking for it. And, I do want to just say too, if you're in a situation where you're not with a partner, I've also worked with women who want to reconnect after kind of a series of relationships, and they have that time to give. And I think even more important at that, well, I think this is true no matter whether you're in a relationship or not. At some point, you have to know that you're enough for yourself first. And I know it sounds kind of cliche to say you have to love yourself first, but really, again, to know that the feelings of enoughness and love always come from you. Like, you don't need somebody else's permission to make you feel loved. And there's so many different facets of love that you can experience. And so being willing to know and understanding how to create it and own it for yourself, because so much of the work I do is helping all of us. I wish we had all been taught this when we were young. Like, we were raised to have people say, well, did Susie hurt your feelings? And we're like, yes, she's responsible for my feelings. And so on the flip side, then we make people responsible for our happiness. And at the end of the day, our lovers or our kids or our partners could go to the end of the moon for us. But if that's not what we want, we're not going to feel what we want to feel. We have to take responsibility for that. And so I think it's so empowering. And I will say that I think some of us do this naturally in parts of our lives that we don't even realize we're doing it. Like, we empower ourselves in ways. Maybe it's at work where, we're able to build self-confidence even when our bosses don't tell us we're doing a good job. But then somehow in our love lives, we're like, well, I can't feel loved without my partner doing X, Y, and Z. And so these skills are actually things that we do on autopilot, but we don't realize. And so it's almost like a superpower we haven't uncovered in ourselves to take responsibility for our emotional life.
And that is so good. That's so, so true. I feel like there's so much of what Jennifer and I talk about just goes hand in hand in what she does and what I do. It's really does comes from within. And then like the second half of life can be so incredible. And it's like, I don't even know how to put it in the right words. It just, you have to do it. I mean, you have to understand and like do a little self-reflection and go, okay, like what is holding you back? Because it really does. It's almost like, feels so old school to say like the buck stops with you, but it kind of does, everybody has different situations, and, no life is perfect. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, particularly in the work that you do, and, I also kind of love trying to be healthy and taking care of myself. Mm-hmm. And, I think one of the biggest things that stand in our way is that, like, waiting for the perfect moment, waiting for that motivation. And, you'll often hear people talk about how you can't wait to be motivated. You have to go do it. But then when we don't feel motivated, we can very easily turn on ourselves and think, well, there's something wrong with us. Or if the program or whatever we're doing doesn't work right away, we kind of feel like, yep, it's me, like I'm broken, I can't do this. And so being willing to continue to kind of intentionally decide, I'm doing this for myself, even when I don't feel like it, or I'm willing to keep showing up and being consistent because I know that this is going to be what's going to kind of take care of my body for the long term. And it's that small mindset shift going from, waiting for this beautiful feeling of motivation, which frankly only happens, even for those of us who are really active and wanting to do physical work and any hard work. Sometimes you feel motivation and sometimes you just feel like this is drudgery, but you're willing to keep committing to that thought that I'm working towards that better version of myself.
Absolutely. It's so much of what we do is really just you have this goal in mind or this thing you're wanting to do, and it's just setting up like the habits that will allow that to come to fruition for you. Because, I certainly don't wake up every day going, I can't wait to do that workout, or I can't wait to eat, salmon for dinner tonight. I mean, whatever the case may be. It's not like I feel that way every day. And but it is just setting like these habits, these non-negotiables up in my life that just kind of kind of becomes just like a snowball effect where I don't even realize how good I feel and how much energy I have, and that I sleep 8 to 9 hours at night. I don't even think about that until I talk to women that don't have that energy, or don't sleep well at night, or can't fit into their clothes, don't feel comfortable in their clothes, or just whatever, have their doctor said they were pre-diabetic, all that kind of stuff. I just think, man, so much of that is just daily habits and just learning how to do that. And I think it's probably the same with what you're talking to a lot of your women about, just more in like mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what mindset do you think you harnessed to get you into those habits when you first started?
Man, that's a good question. For me, it was just, I knew in my early 40s, whatever I had done in the past wasn't working anymore. And so for me, it was like, I didn't like feeling snippy, at 4 or 5 o'clock, because I was hungry. I didn't realize that I was hangry. I didn't like that feeling. I didn't like that I was tired every day. And I was like tired, but wired. I really didn't sleep well at night, but I was really tired in the mid-afternoon, and just kind of could just tell that even though people thought I was really healthy and I worked out a lot, I wasn't, I really wasn't that healthy. And so for me, it was just more of just recognizing there has to be a better way. I'm exhausting myself with workouts. Like, what is it? And also hearing a doctor just say, well, that's just perimenopause, and you'll probably be feeling like that for 10 years. Also will make you a little bit mad and go, well, I don't believe that.
It's so true. And just being willing to continue to commit to yourself. Like, I
Yeah.
want to keep feeling better, and I think so many of us are in this place where doctors don't really understand like all of the changes, and they really haven't done enough testing to understand all the changes. And HRT is really only kind of coming back as one solution. But I mean, at the end of the day, we're left in this situation. And of course, all of our bodies are different. So,
For sure.
not one solution won't be perfect for the other solution. And so we all have to find our way. And I think that becomes kind of one of those frustrating things for us women when we try, and have probably been trying various nutrition, diet, workout programs our entire life, to try to get the results that we want. And so really being able to find grace for ourselves in this period of life, and think of this as a long-term commitment for our health and our wellness. I think that mindset alone kind of helps you say, these habits may not be that exciting, but this
Yeah.
consistency and showing up for myself every day is what's going to make me feel my best. And that alone, kind of in like holding yourself out for just that good feeling. It's not even about like the sexy body or
No, I think I
attracting the
just have a
man.
lot of pride. Like, I have a lot of pride in that. Yeah, I think that's kind of half of what it is too. And it's also, I find it really interesting how when moms, especially, bringing it back to moms out there, whenever moms kind of take control of their health and, start eating better and whatever, the ripple effect into their families and their friends, their coworkers, but their children, their spouse is so great that women don't even realize what influencers they are in their own circle. So like, we think of social media influencers, but we don't ever think about just all of us in our own little world and how we influence those around us. And I'm always like, man, if I could change one mom's life, I know that the potential there is generational, and that gets me so fired up a lot. So it's probably, I'm sure, the same for you.
Oh, it really is. You find when the right program, when the right mindset shift happens, you see the transformation in the woman's eyes. And just knowing, I actually recently had the chance to reconnect with a few of my clients. And, it's been kind of over a year since I've worked with them. And so I reached out to just kind of say, hey, like, how's everything going? Like, you were doing really well when I left you, and I want to know how things are going. And it's so interesting to hear how a number of them had additional life challenges. And as we all are going to go through kind of ebbs and flows of their life, but they felt like they had the tools to be able to see themselves through it, and the mindset to be willing to kind of give themselves grace through the hard parts, but also keep trying to, work on the solution, work on their mindset. And I just think it's such a beautiful thing when we're willing to continue to recommit to ourselves and really believe. One of the things I often say is like trusting ourselves to make the right decision for ourselves, and really committing to that, and deciding that no matter what, I'm going to keep trusting myself to make a decision, even if that means next week I'm making a different decision because I've learned something new.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was wondering in my mind, like, I don't know if you can give us any, client, kind of stories or, success stories that, I mean, obviously don't need names, but just what if someone was looking to work with you, not that every story is the same, but do you have any kind of, tidbits you can give us on people that you've worked with?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, so many different women. I mean, and I think it's actually what I created, or my mom archetypes around, was really kind of in looking at the problems they were facing and the beauty of the women that they are in terms of their strengths. I mean, I think, the guardian and the woman who feels a high level of anxiety, and being able to kind of start to unwind that anxiety and find peace, and hold space for her worry while also letting go of the catastrophizing. I've had a number of women in that camp, that the achiever being able to kind of let go of needing to control, and then starting to see how self-actualized their child is, and almost kind of revel in the success they're creating for themselves, and not need it to be a certain way anymore. And in different ways, in fact, what I'll actually say is often women will come to me because they're struggling with some aspect of the transition, and often in line with those archetypes in terms of what they're challenged by. But within the first few sessions, as I'm teaching the tools, the focus becomes less on the kids and less on the partner or whatever that kind of immediate challenge is, and more on themselves. Because what they quickly learn is that whatever your kids are doing, whatever your spouse is doing, whatever your boss is doing, at the end of the day, you have the ability to create whatever lens you want to have about that. And there's no lens that's wrong, but when you start to understand how impactful that lens is in creating or taking away your emotional well-being, you start to realize like, oh, there are certain patterns of ways that I look at my life. And it's not just my kids, it's actually the way I look at myself or the way I look at my future. And starting to kind of take accountability for that really starts to help moms put together the pieces. And, frankly, many women have been through therapy in the past, and sometimes have been kind of, diagnosed with an anxiety, that they have anxiety, or that they've been told that their parents kind of made them a certain way. And then they're left with this feeling that I'm broken because of what happened in my past, or, this is just the way that I show up in my life. And even that lens starts to color who we think we are, and being able to kind of rewrite that narrative to actually decide you get to be whoever you decide you want to be. And there might be things in your mind that tell you that you can't be it, that you're held back from that. But let's get to the heart of that. Because at the end of the day, if I want to decide I'm going to pursue this big life, like what right does anyone else to tell me differently? That I get to create that life for myself. And I think sometimes even just being able to dream about your life in a different way opens up so many possibilities, that it's just so exciting to think about how you can take charge of that identity shift in a new way.
Truly. Oh my gosh, I totally agree. Well, I hate to wrap this up. I feel like we could talk forever, but let's get everybody to you. Where can they reach you on Instagram?
Yeah, I'm at Small Jar Coach.
Gotcha. And tell me about Small Jar.
So you can find me at www.thesmalljar.com. And I am I have a one-on-one coaching program that lasts for 10 weeks where I take you through the tools. We have lessons that I take you through these tools to really understand your mindset and how to kind of create this new identity to empower yourself to create the life that you want. I work with my clients one-on-one for a period of 10 weeks. And then after that, kind of continue depending on what the circumstances of the client are and what type of support they need. But after the 10 weeks, women feel such a different level of empowerment in terms of how to move forward, how to create connection with their kids, how to find purpose in a different way. It's such an honor to be able to work with women in this way.
Oh my gosh, I love the niche that you have found. And I think it's such a wonderful thing for moms. I mean, what you said early on is just going to stick with me. I mean, this is a habit since, when you said taking prenatal vitamins, we never took these big horse pills until we're pregnant with our kids. And then you just becomes a habit to do anything and everything to make them the healthiest, best versions of themselves. And it's not that you're ever going to break that habit, but to maybe kind of use it in a better way, I guess, as the, life changes for sure. Oh my gosh. That's going to stick with me. So, okay. So at small jar coach, that's on Instagram, and then thesmalljar.com. That is over the internet. And then I will put in the show notes how they can take the mom archetype quiz, which is so interesting.
Oh, good. Well, thank you again for having me on the podcast.
Of course.
It's such a pleasure to meet you. And I've been I've been recovering from foot surgery, as I told you. And so I've been feeling really motivated by your inspiration of getting back to it. So thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate it so much. And I know so many women are thanking you as well. Ladies, protein deficiency is a huge problem, but it doesn't have to be. 1 in 3 adults don't consume enough protein, and it's no surprise when you understand how much you actually need in a single day. If you want to build muscle, lose fat, keep your immune system strong, and have all-day energy, then you should be eating at least 0.75 grams per pound of body weight. So, for example, if you weigh 150 pounds, that means you need almost 115 grams of protein every single day. For reference, 1 egg has just 6 grams of protein. So you need to eat almost 20 eggs to get 115 grams of protein. And if you're a senior, you need up to 50% more than that. That's because as we age, our bodies require more protein to preserve muscle mass, keep us healthy, reduce recovery time from illness, and improve overall quality of life. Clearly, getting enough protein is incredibly important. But how in the world do you hit that target protein count without spending a fortune or endless hours in the kitchen? Getting enough might seem impossible, but it's actually easy when you add Prime Protein's doctor-formulated, super clean, super smooth, incredibly easy to digest beef isolate protein powder to your diet. 1 scoop has 21 grams of protein, and with only a small handful of ingredients, you're getting only what you need. 100% carefully sourced real food, nothing else. No additives, no allergens, chemicals, fillers, or other junk ever. Plus, Prime Protein is incredibly delicious. I think it tastes like dessert, so you even have fun hitting your macros. Okay, if you are interested in getting more protein into your diet, head to today's show notes and I will give you a special link that can get you 15% off your first order of Prime Protein.